I will spend a few minutes providing an introduction to the topic today, setting the stage and understanding the context. Certainly, we're living in interesting times, and they're very interesting times both as consumers and as as consumers of insurance in particular, which is our topic for today. And so what we would like to talk today about is how digital transformation and current events are actually colliding to create this perfect storm of new business challenges for insurers and consumers who interact with them. So by way of providing just a little bit of context for the discussion, I want to spend a few minutes talking about digital transformation as a concept. And this is something that has been a center point of discussion for the past several years for many of the service sectors that we deal with, banking and insurance in particular. Digital transformation may seem like a very big topic with global implications and everything. So I want to provide a little bit of a sanity check on what digital transformation is and really to simplify what it means for our purposes today. And quite simply, digital transformation, as shown here, is redefining customer experience with low-contact technology. And what that means in everyday terms is to make the engagement between the insurer, for example, and the consumer easier and seamless. And we have lots of examples of these kinds of interactions that we can use to guide us. And some of those are presented here. We're all familiar with streaming media. We're all familiar with rideshare apps. And prior to the COVID epidemic, when we were traveling a lot, the first thing that we did instinctively when we landed at the airport was to call up Uber or Lyft, and in that we would order a ride, and the app itself completely packaged the experience for us so that we knew who our driver was, what our destination was, what route we were taking, what car we were taking, how much it was going to cost. We knew all of that up front. And the app did not invent any kind of particular technology, but it figured out a smarter way to use that technology to remove a point of friction in that customer experience. Now the alternative, which is taking a traditional cab, is always less attractive because there are so many things you don't know. And the fact that we now have that instinct as consumers is testimony to how effective digital transformation is in everyday life. And largely, we can look to streaming media. We can look at the way we consume music today, the way that we use visualization to navigate our way around with Google Maps as an example. Those are all examples of digital transformation in everyday life that define or that are intimately connected with the way that we interact and consume. And organizations today, when we look at that, how digital transformation moves from everyday consumerism into the B2C or business-to-consumer interaction, and case in point being insurance and banking and those services types of offerings, there's a lot of uneasiness that insurers feel about how they connect with their customers. And you can see that uneasiness or that fear with how well they're connecting with their customers by the proliferation of measurements. Net Promoter Score is a good example of it. Survey tools like SurveyMonkey and Qualtrics. You cannot have a consumer experience today like filing a claim without immediately being hit with a customer satisfaction survey. Why are those important? Because traditional insurers and other organizations that provide services know that they need to provide good customer experience, but they don't have any way of knowing that they're delivering it. So they use tools like this to give them at least some semblance of an objective measure. And the source of that fear is that they are comparing themselves to common consumer apps that are easier to use and that navigate specific customer journeys. For example, buying a coffee at a local drive-up or ordering food online for pickup. All of those experiences are much more easily packaged, but When insurers provide services to their consumers, they're not as easily packaged. The experiences can be much more complicated, and the processes involved are more complicated. Sandy will dig into that in much greater depth. So for today's insurers, removing friction from experience really requires rethinking what that experience looks like, how the process, and most importantly, how the content, the documents that are a necessary part of that process are consumed in a more seamless manner. And insurers are being forced today to rethink their engagement models in very radical ways. And they have to do it fast, because suddenly we are in a set of circumstances, as shown here, that has forced us to redo all of our business interactions. If before digital transformation was an ivory tower type of concept, the COVID crisis that has hit us today has forced us to think about what the priorities in our spending should be. And accordingly, experts have already rung in on this topic and have produced a number of insights that whatever digital transformation priorities there have been in the past, those priorities are now shifted to making technology work for consumer experience that removes human contact or face-to-face contact, because so much of what we have to do today, it has the mandate of social distancing and removing actual physical touches, manual processes, and human touches. And with that in mind, I will turn it over to my co-presenter, Sandy, who will talk about the specific implications for this change in the COVID crisis for digital transformation and the impact it's having on insurers and their interactions with their customers.
Thanks, Reggie. I spend part of my time as an independent industry analyst covering intelligent process technologies, but I also work directly with a lot of insurance and other enterprise clients on their technology strategy and architecture. So this gives me a pretty good understanding of the business pain points and then how technology can fix some of those problems. Now, I also write about process automation topics on my blog at column2.com. You can see that in a little orange circle there. But today, I'm going to start with insurance business challenges, including some of the new ones due to the pandemic, and then cover some of the process technologies that can be used to address this, and then I'll finish up with a use case on how to apply intelligent process technologies to redesign your claims processes. So the first challenge that we have in the insurance marketplace is new competitors. Now, Sonnet is an online brand of a 150-year-old Canadian insurance company called Economical Insurance. Now, this isn't just the online presence for Economical. Sonnet is really run as if it were a separate entity, even though their operations are part of Economical. So they offer home, auto insurance. They even offer pet insurance, I see now, and it can be purchased online without an agent or a broker sales network. Now, customers feel secure because there's this big insurance company behind Sonnet, but they're willing to have less in-person service in exchange for lower premiums. Now, another type of competitor is the online-only brands. Lemonade is a purely online brand that offers home insurance for owners and renters, but it's not the front end for a traditional insurance company. It's an actual insurer themselves. They have reinsurance by Lloyd's to back them up, but they are themselves an insurance company. Now, like the online brands of traditional insurance companies, they don't have agents or brokers, and they can issue a policy in a couple of minutes. But where they really differ is on claims. So they're using artificial intelligence and chatbots for capturing and processing claims. So when you file a claim with Lemonade, you don't type in a long description of what happened. You enter a little bit of information about the lost or damaged property, and then you record a video of yourself describing what happened. Now, this video record could be viewed later for more information if your text description wasn't good enough, and it also acts as a declaration to help counteract fraud. So they've automated the decisions and the processes that happen behind the scenes, and now they can settle and pay claims in as little as 3 minutes, which sounds like unbelievable. So the funds are actually in your bank account while you're still looking at the app on your phone. This is a serious disruption of claims processes for most companies. If you look at most insurance companies, very paper intensive. It can take weeks or months to settle. Now, the last of the new competitors is the insurtechs. So these can be a significant threat to traditional insurance companies because they're taking advantage, in some cases, of reduced regulatory requirements, and they're able to get themselves into different kinds of markets than a traditional insurance company. Now, Lemonade technically falls into the InsurTech category now because they're offering an API to let you integrate their services into any app or website. But I'm showing Casco here, which is one of the pure InsurTechs. So Casco provides a link between traditional insurance companies and digital marketplaces so that you can buy insurance as an add-on directly within an e-commerce website. So they're now disintermediating the traditional insurance company and being the face to the consumer as it is of what the insurance is. So if you work for a traditional insurance company, these last two are your competitors, not the other old school insurance companies. Now, the next challenge that you see in insurance is new business models and new products. And there's a number of different forms here. I've just mentioned a few of them. Usage-based insurance. We're seeing this commonly now in the automotive market. So the premium that you pay depends on how much you drive or how well you drive, or whether maybe you drive for Uber 2 days a week and just for personal use the rest of the time. And the premiums can actually get adjusted every month or even every week, but that means that the insurer has to have a data feed directly plugged into your vehicle. So I've shown here the Toyota Bright Drive. So this is built right into the new Toyota vehicles, and they partner with Nationwide Insurance to provide the insurance capabilities. But really, you can do this with any insurance company and any modern vehicle. You can do this by plugging a device into the vehicle's onboard diagnostics port. So we're seeing Ford partnering with Allstate, but other partnerships could come up here. The second different business model I wanted to mention here was microinsurance, and this is something you see more in developing countries. So this is insuring very specific perils, such as crop failures for small farmers. So the premiums are really low, the coverage caps are really low. So in order to be effective in this marketplace, you have to have most of your processes automated and really efficient, or else it's not financially viable as an insurer to be in this market. A lot of companies don't even bother with this market, even though there's a potentially huge number of possible customers there, because they can't automate their processes and it costs them too much to handle these very small policies and small claims. Now, we're also seeing new ways of processing claims that can be a competitive difference. So the new paradigm underwriters that I've mentioned here, this is really interesting. It's a parametric insurance, and it pays out based on external data, usually weather, rather than waiting for customers to make a claim. So let's say there's a strong correlation between wind speed and crop damage in certain areas, and there's typically hurricanes in that area. So now they measure the wind speed using all kinds of remote sensors, and they trigger a payout to a customer when it reaches a certain threshold in that customer's location, rather than the customer having to file a claim. So there's some things here, some new ways of thinking about claims. And of course, automated claims like we saw with Lemonade, this is something that any company can do, but you need to have automated decisions for adjudication and automated processes to handle the payouts and not have human intervention involved. So you can take those low risk and relatively low value claims and not have your highly skilled claims managers spending their time on them, because you know they're probably eventually going to get approved anyway. So that's the sort of thing that where you can just look at doing an automated claim processing. Now, the third set of challenges is all around this ever-changing landscape of regulations, risk, and compliance. A lot of jurisdictions have privacy laws to protect consumers, and you need to have business processes and automated decisions that can ensure that you're compliant without having to have a lot of manual compliance procedures, because those are that's when things get forgotten or things get lost. Now, you also need to have, for certain types of insurance, you need to have transparency and fairness of decisions. This is an interesting one. In Europe, under the GDPR, for example, you have to be able to show the logic that goes into making a decision, such as deciding whether a customer can purchase a specific type of policy or whether a claim is approved or denied. If not, the customer can demand a review, a manual review of the decision, which of course costs you a lot more for the time involved in there. So you really want to have standardized, transparent processes and decisions to support these kinds of regulations. And there are a lot of consumer protections in insurance. We have compliance requirements around things like conflict of interest, disclosure, broker compensation models. So again, these are all things that you need to be concerned about with your processes and decisions that you have. Now, the first 3 points are more around compliance and consumer protection. That these last 2 points are about the financial feasibility of the insurer themselves. So we can have unexpected underwriting risks that pop up at any time. Usually we use examples like extreme weather, intentional acts of destruction, but I think we have one right now that we're living through that is definitely an unexpected underwriting risk. And these can really cause stress on the deep pockets of the insurance companies, and they all have related in changes to how policies get written and how claims are paid. It's very interesting to see, for example, in February or March, when the COVID crisis was first starting to hit in Europe and North America, is the travel insurance policies were being rewritten so that if you had a new travel insurance policy that was issued at that time, it would have different terms to it than one that had been written, say, a month before, because the insurance companies realized they could not keep offering the same kind of coverage that they could in a scenario where every travel might potentially get canceled in a very short period of time. Now, we also have the last point is about capital standards for insurance companies. This is about how much money that an insurer has to have available to pay out claims. And there are some changes now in what this capital standard is for certain types of insurance companies. And as this number pushes higher, then companies take fewer risks and they're generally less competitive. So just a lot of different things around regulations and risks in the insurance industry. Now, we also have this business challenges around customer expectations. And this is what Reggie was talking about too, that customers have constant contact with all these other brands that they use through apps and online channels, and they expect their insurance company is going to have the same level of customer experience. So you need to have a modern online presence. It's not just about being as good as the other insurance companies, but it has to be as good as any other app that somebody uses on a daily basis. So updating a policy or making a claim should be just as easy or even easier than ordering dinner through your app. Now, another customer expectation is that when they initiate a transaction through a self-service channel, the action will be completed automatically and near instantaneously. So that Lemonade example, for example, where somebody was putting in a claim and it was getting paid within a matter of a couple of minutes and money would show up in their bank account right away. But let's look at some things that might be more realistic for traditional insurance companies. So think about adding a new driver to an existing auto policy. So the customer needs to be sure that when they add a new driver, if they do this online, that the coverage takes place immediately, because if it doesn't, then they're going to be unhappy. They're going to be left in this state where they don't know when the new coverage is coming into effect. So we can't always meet the standard of service like we have with Lemonade, for example, but things do need to get done quickly, and also the customers need to have automated status notification sent to them if it's held up anywhere along the line. So this means that your processes and your decisions that you have across all your back-end systems have to be fully automated and they have to be integrated. Now, unfortunately, insurance companies have an incredibly low trust rating in the market right now, and they're seeing as much as 25% churn in some sectors. Now, everybody has a story, including myself, of how their premiums went up by 50% one year or they were denied a claim, and people tend to look around and change insurers quite frequently. They're always looking for a better deal, and it's a very price-sensitive market because customers are not loyal to their current carrier. And in the age of social media, you can't hide behind some veil of secrecy when it comes to how well you process claims or if your premiums are increasing. If your service is bad, your claims resolution time is bad, that can no longer be your little secret. It's going to be out there somewhere on social media where somebody is reviewing what your product is doing and what your service is doing. So that brings us then to today's challenges. So we've talked about the traditional things, the challenges in the insurance industry, but right now we're looking to survive the current situation. So depending on what products you have and what market segment you're in, you might have had a drop in business. You might be scrambling to realign your operations and to possibly shed some of your staff. Other segments are booming, and this in itself is a challenge if you can't keep up with the demand because you have a lot of manual processes. There's big disruptions in supply chains if there's the physical products. So from manufacturing problems with shipping and delivery, social distancing, plant closures, these are all causing problems in supply chains. And your customer base could be changing. You could be now selling more business insurance to cover home offices, for example, instead of selling business insurance just to businesses for their office locations. Now, secondly, you want to position your company to thrive as you pass through this disruption and on to recovery. And you're going to do this by scaling to the new levels of business that you have now and what you can expect in the future, whether it's more or less than what you had prior to the pandemic. You're going to use different methods for interacting with your customers and for getting new customers. So there's a lot of things that are going to change, but there are ways in which you can become even more competitive. So let me expand on some of these challenges a little bit. The first challenge that we're seeing in this new world is the fluctuating economy. Stock markets are all over the place. We're seeing some big winners and losers in different market segments. And if you're a company whose services are in demand and you can still deliver, usually because you have some level of automation, then you're doing really well. Other segments are taking a hit regardless of how well they're doing. So for example, if you're in travel or travel insurance, you're probably not doing that well right now, and that's not going to change that much in the foreseeable future. So we have this financial unrest, which makes a lot of consumers kind of cautious about what they're purchasing, but there's really low interest rates, which is having other people want to spend more now. Now, this factor about the disrupted supply chains is really impacting companies in a lot of areas. If you have one little hiccup in a supply chain because of globalization, or even a rumor of a hiccup in a supply chain, you can have panic buying and you can have shortages. So you think about insurance, you think of this as kind of a services business, but what if you can't get vehicle repair parts or building materials, and so you can't resolve a property claim because you can't get have a vehicle be repaired or a building fixed that was covered under a policy. So this can be a real issue in all kinds of businesses. And then we see a lot of companies and a lot of consumers really sort of hunkering down and wanting to preserve their cash. And there is no planning out there that matches the level of disruption that we're having now. This is not just a market crash. This is a whole societal upheaval as well. And in fact, the markets have mostly recovered, so we're not even having a market crash, but we are having a lot of trepidation in the consumer marketplace because a lot of people are concerned about their employment or about the viability of their business. Now, an interesting factor about all these disruptions is that they're going to be different in different countries. This is not purely a financial disruption that we're seeing, but a whole supply chain and workforce disruption. So if you have operations in different countries, you're going to find that your processes may not be the same everywhere, and you have to adjust to where that country is in their recovery. Are they still in lockdown? Are they all back in their offices? Can they be processing work as they did before? Or can they be out selling insurance in the way that they were before? Or do they need to socially distance themselves? So we have a lot of concerns about how the things might be different in one country versus another. Now, we're seeing a massive change in how work gets done within companies too, and the workforce that's in response to that, and then the technology that we need for that. So you've already figured out how to handle a distributed workforce, and you might have plans to really continue that indefinitely. A lot of companies are figuring out that you don't need to have everybody in their office all the time. So your teams need to be able to work productively from anywhere. You need to have some amount of automation around getting work to them and making sure it's done right. You need to maintain security and compliance. And they have to just still be able to collaborate with their colleagues. Now, there might not always be chickens, as you see in the example here, but there's this collision of home and work life that means that people are dealing with family and pets and home deliveries while they're working. So there needs to be changes to the way that people work. And also, along with the changes to what they do on a day-to-day basis, there has to be changes in this relationship between employers and employees. We need to see different leadership models. We need to have different metrics for employees. This old school office where a manager walked around and made sure that everybody was looking busy, this is obviously not a good fit with remote work. So your employees need to be rewarded on results, not on the amount of time that they're sitting at their desk, because you don't necessarily know when they're sitting at their desk. Now, at the end of the day, The old way of working in an office is probably gone forever. It doesn't mean that we won't go back to working in offices. There's some things that just work better in person, but companies are realizing that allowing employees to work from home at their discretion is a good thing all around. It can actually help save costs, it can make some people more productive, and it can be just as effective as how things were when you were all in one place. And in many industries, such as financials and insurance, as you can see from this quote from the CEO of Barclays, there's probably no need to ever revert to this large office model again. Going to the office may become more of an exception than the rule. Now, the third major business challenge that we're seeing due to the pandemic disruption is dealing with contactless customer interactions. You might not have Domino's autonomous pizza delivery ovens, but there are still ways that you need to have interactions with your customers, and you need to figure out how to do that. So you could have the same people deal with customers that might have dealt with customers in person, do it with some sort of online collaboration platform. You can also start to do more self-service for simpler transactions. You can have chatbots that might answer some of the questions and then escalate to an agent if they can't solve the problem. There's also the potential to have remote devices that do some of the work, such as claims inspection. There was this very interesting case where Allstate Insurance was already using drones to check for roof damage after hurricanes so that an adjuster doesn't have to spend half a day coming to your place and climbing on your roof. This let them settle claims a lot faster and cost them a lot less in terms of the adjuster's time. But this now also has the added advantage of providing a contactless interaction. So there are ways to rethink how you're interacting with your customers. Now, the key to moving a lot of customers to online interactions is you need to have some sort of modern customer experience. It has to be easy to use, has to be functional. Many people are going to prefer to manage their insurance online, whether it's renewing their policy, updating their address, creating a claim, whatever it is. They don't want to call in. They want to be able to do this all online end-to-end and only escalate to a customer service agent if they have a problem with what they're handling. So these touchless interactions, then, this is the new normal, and they're here to stay. So whether it's online customer support, remote claims inspection, customers want that for their own support and their own safety. Now, none of this is going to happen without a modern technology infrastructure. So if you're going to support remote workers, have a great online customer experience, and process all of these transactions automatically, you probably have some work to do to get your technology up to scratch. The biggest challenge that we find in technology modernization now is all of this creaking legacy infrastructure. It already couldn't do a lot of what we previously wanted to do in terms of agile processes and customer experience, but it's also fragile under unexpected loads. If your company has now moved most of your workforce off-site, you have to, you've probably already set up secure remote access methods. This puts a strain on your network infrastructure and potentially on your back-end systems too, and additional security concerns that you might have. So if you want to push ahead with modernization, you'll do what a lot of companies are doing and rush to get your core processes on cloud platforms. So this definitely makes those more scalable and more available to a distributed workforce, but there's a risk with any kind of accelerated IT project when you're moving from legacy infrastructure into this new world of cloud infrastructure. So definitely some challenges there if you're moving ahead with that. The first lesson then that we're learning from the coronavirus situation is to quickly get this technology infrastructure up and running to support new ways of working. This is exactly what's happening as companies are being forced to modernize or perish. Now, there's an opportunity for technology modernization and business reorganization that will not just allow you to survive during this disruption, but actually increase your competitive differentiation as we exit the crisis. That's the survive and thrive that I was talking about at the beginning of this small section of slides. So the core of these competitive changes will be around creating agile, intelligent processes that can be scaled and distributed. So if you need to create a new business model or product, agile processes and automation are going to help you with that. You need to support a remote workforce, whether it's in the next town or the next country. A distributed cloud-based platform architecture would do that. Need to scale a part of your business up or down quickly? Automation and cloud scalable architecture will support that. So all of these provide you with new ways of doing business that provide the technology support for doing these new ways of business. Now, once you get all these plans in place to become more competitive post-recovery, you're then in great shape to get back to business with all those pre-pandemic challenges that I was talking about earlier. There's always going to be new competitors, new business models, new regulations, new customer expectations. But you'll find that a lot of your competitors have hit the pause button, and you have the chance to keep moving forward and come out of this in a better position to compete with those customers. So every company needs to have a post-pandemic playbook. Things are not going back to exactly how they were before, and you need to consider how your organization and its business processes need to adapt. Now, I've been talking through this presentation on the importance of processes, and specifically intelligent processes, but let's get down to a firmer definition and talk about some of the technologies that are behind there. So I wanted to start with these business challenges and do a little bit on the technology now, and then we'll finish up with an insurance use case. So first of all, intelligent processes need to have a strategic scope. These are the end-to-end processes that integrate functional silos and cover the entire customer journey. So if you think about insurance claims, this would be everything from the time the first claim documents hit, it goes through some sort of first notice of loss process, it goes through the claims process, all of the pieces that are attached to the claims process, and then goes through to payment and possibly things like recovery of a wrecked vehicle or whatever might be at the end of a process. So it really needs to be that end-to-end journey that we're seeing there. Intelligent processes are also automated by default. It doesn't mean that we don't have people in them. It means that we have people performing tasks where human judgment or human interaction is required. In the next couple of slides, I'll talk about some of the automation technologies, but these are the basics. You have to automate processes, decisions, and tasks, and this is pretty mature technology. And then you want to look at bringing in artificial intelligence and machine learning. So we're starting to see these a lot now in both underwriting and claims adjudication already, and these are going to become increasingly important. Now lastly, intelligent processes need to be agile so that you can change them. Otherwise you can't bring out new products or handle regulatory changes very easily. So you want them to be created using model-driven low-code environments for doing the automation of the processes and the decisions. This lets business people participate in the changes, and it also lets the changes roll out quickly because you don't have a large code base that you're dealing with. Now, this typically works well with a service-oriented architecture, including microservices, so that the processes can just add or swap out capabilities by calling a different service without a lot of new custom development being done. Now, I could spend a couple of hours just talking about the landscape of intelligent process automation tools, but I'm going to keep this pretty short. I want to look at the three basic categories. First of all is the modeling and analysis tools. Before you start automating your processes, you need to have some understanding of what you're already doing and the ability to map out what you think you want to do. So we have process and decision modeling, and there's standards around that. Process mining tools let you import history logs from systems like your ERP and CRM systems and then figure out what the process model looks like within and across those systems. So this helps you to identify all the different ways that a process is being done and then figure out the reasons for why there's differences when the process is done in what should be the same way every time. And once you have that, the process model is defined, you can use simulation tools, see what happens to your key performance indicators if you change certain parameters, such as what happens if we run these activities in parallel instead of serially, or what happens if we automate these steps. Now, monitoring tools let you keep aware of what's happening right now in your processes. This can be visualizations like dashboards, it can be alerts, but also things like predictive analytics. And what this is predicting when things might be headed in the wrong direction and then giving you some possible pointers about what you might do in order to head off the problems that might be happening. So the next best actions, or even automatically take corrective or preventative actions. And then we have a whole raft of automation technologies, and this is where I spend a lot of my time with enterprise customers. This is all about redesigning the applications to become application or intelligent processes. A lot of different moving parts here. You'll likely end up with multiple automation products from different vendors, and I'll talk about these as we go along, so I don't want to spend too much time here, but we're looking at things like intelligent capture, where you might be using machine learning and other techniques to understand content and then match it up with what's required by your internal processes to eliminate the need for manual data entry. I'm going to come back to that because that's especially important when we talk about claims. Task automation, we see robotic process automation, or RPA, the ability to automate individual tasks that are usually done by a person, and then you might orchestrate those using a business process management or dynamic case management system to have those all assembled into an end-to-end process. Now, those processes can also call out to automated decisions or business rules, and they can use artificial intelligence and machine learning to make recommendations at different steps or even to help with the automated decisioning. So lots, as I said, lots of different moving parts here, and you may not need all of these, but there's a place for most of them in a complex business environment like an insurance company. Now, on top of all the usual considerations when implementing intelligent processes, there's also some factors about adapting to the current crisis. So the first thing is we need to get physical documents out of processes. And it's really funny. It's like for years, I go into insurance companies and many other, mostly I work with financials and insurance. And I've been going into companies and I say, you got to get rid of the paper. As you either have to get it in an electronic form, or as soon as it comes in the door, convert it to electronic form, and then it's never on paper again. And everybody agrees that that's a really good idea, and then only about half of them actually do it. Well, now companies are being forced to do this. So moving physical paper between workers when your workers are in different cities is really slow and expensive. And in actual fact, there's rarely a legal requirement to have physical documents. So if you just get it all converted to digital form right away when it enters as soon as it enters the company, or better yet, have it uploaded by customers directly in digital form, that can just be part of the distributed processes. Now, you're going to need to analyze these distributed processes to make sure that you're doing all the required steps. Your processes are not happening the same way that they used to when everybody was in the same office. And you also can't do process modeling in the same kind of way and process analysis. It used to be a business analyst would go around and do job shadowing or in-person interviews, and you can't really do that. But now, business analysts can start to use process mining and task mining to extract processes from the system logs and user activities without having to do in-person interviews and walkthroughs of processes. So some good opportunities to actually start using some of the tools differently. Obviously, workers need to have a productive work environment. This might be some new collaboration tools. It needs to be sensitive to slower network speeds. You also for secure against malicious network intrusion, because you're now going to be running over a worker's home internet connection, even if you're using a VPN on top of that. Now, the automated work routing, work needs to get to the right worker at the right time, regardless of their physical location. You can't have managers, as I said, walking around and assessing and redistributed work, which often happens within a claims environment. I've seen many claims operations area where the size of the pile of claims folders on somebody's desk will have a manager come up and grab some of them and plop them on somebody else's desk. You just can't do that anymore in the same way. So this also needs to have monitoring built right in. You need to be able to track the performance of people as they're doing their work. And you also need to track compliance so that you know what they're doing and making sure that they're following the right processes. You really want to automate tasks wherever possible. This is where things like RPA come in. You're having a radical upheaval now in your business processes, and this is a great opportunity to bring in something like RPA and rework and automate those tasks and decisions to try and reduce the amount of routine work that's being done by people. So I spoke about these technologies on the previous slide, and it's really, there's a lot in here that you can use in these automation stages. So business process management, decision management, RPA, AI and machine learning, these are kind of all in here. And then lastly, and this is kind of not about the processes themselves, but if you find yourself with an underutilized workforce and you're now using these low-code automation platforms to build applications, let some of those people learn how to build some new applications on there. So all these new workflows between distributed workers, and you could end up with some pretty good productivity applications that are built by citizen developers to help manage these processes. Okay, so enough of the technology. I'm going to finish up with a use case on creating intelligent claims processes. Now, claims used to be the red-headed stepchild of, as the term goes, of the insurance industry, where not a lot of money was spent on making it more efficient or making it better, because it was seen as being a way that money flowed out of the company. But then a lot of regulations that came in that said, well, you need to settle claims in a timely manner, or you can be subject to fines because you're no longer compliant with insurance industry regulations. So companies started to step up their activity a little bit, and now that customers are sort of comparing notes on this too, this is really a key to customer satisfaction. So if you're not settling your claims fairly and you're not doing it in a timely manner, your customers are going to look somewhere else when they're renewing their policy. But profitability too, it's managing claims decisions so that you can have some sort of automation in decisions or some artificial intelligence in the decisions. This can ensure that you're only paying out what you're obligated to pay under the policy, and you're not leaving it to the discretion of a claims manager. You're actually making sure that those decisions get made about the amount of payout every time in the same way. You also get a productivity boost by improving the claims process and some automation, which is pretty high touch in many companies as well. So let's look at the specific challenges with claims. First of all, very content intensive. You can have in your claim file, you can have written documents, filled forms, photographs, videos, audio, other types of unstructured content. And to make things more complicated, this may not all be provided up front. So possibly the claimant didn't have it at the time that they created the claim, or they didn't know it was necessary. Or the claims manager didn't even realize it was necessary until after they had reviewed other information. So at any time throughout the life of the claim, the claims manager might request some additional content from the claimant or from other parties, like a doctor's report to do with a personal injury in an auto accident, or the other claimant in a two-party claim. So lots of manual processes and decisions in a lot of claim processing areas. Claims manager probably has some checklists that they use for certain parts of the claims process. They're going to, if they have somebody's basement floods and there's a property damage claim, there's probably a little checklist that they go through for all the information. But then they often use their own internalized knowledge to decide if they need to get more information, or if they need to have somebody go out and assess the damage, or if the claim's ready to adjudicate. So they could be making these decisions mostly manually, and then also deciding what the next step in the process is manually, without having this standardized in any way. So I'm not saying that processes and decisions need to be manual. Definitely many other insurance companies have proven that that's not the case. I'm saying that in a lot of insurance companies that I visited, they are manual, and that's causing them a problem in both profitability and customer satisfaction. Now, all this manual work increases the time it takes to complete the claim. So even if you pay out the amount they're satisfied with, if it takes you 3 months to pay it out, you're going to have an unhappy customer. So they don't have a choice about who processes this claim, but they do have a choice when it comes to renewal time. So claims management systems are pretty good at their core functionality, but they're not very flexible when it comes to processes, and they're not very good at handling content that's associated with the claim. So often that means that there's process management and content management systems that get added to augment the claims management system functionality. And there's a big challenge in these manual claims operations when the volume of claims spikes unexpectedly. So hurricane, storm, flood, industrial accident, a large number of homeowners in an area are all making claims at the same time, and the claims operation becomes overwhelmed with these new claims because they have too many manual steps that have to be done. So if you can't quickly process these claims as they arrive, then you could be violating regulations and end up with some pretty unhappy customers. Now, we're definitely not getting rid of these claims adjusters, as I said before, but there are some simpler adjudication situations that could be automated, and then leave the claims adjusters or the claims managers more time to deal with the complex situations. And I did want to just touch on content in claims, because the claims case folder is this essential permanent record of what happened and why it happened. So it includes information that might be created internally by the insurance company, by external field adjusters, by medical professionals, the claimant, other insurance companies, all kinds of people, and all kinds of information get in there. And that file is accessed constantly during claim processing, and these files can get really large for long-running claims, like medical disability claims. Now, definitely some standard forms can be handled automatically as they arrive, but a lot of content has to be manually reviewed and then classified and filed into the case folder. And this really slows down the process. Could mean that some information isn't even available for hours or days until after it arrives, especially now where documents might be coming in one location and the workers are in another location. So without having some sort of document classification and intelligent capture, it's really difficult to find all the information that's required or to search across content and document for similarities or common factors. So just to kind of finish up with some things about redesigning these intelligent processes then. So we have two kinds of activities when we're redesigning processes. First of all, we need to understand the processes. What does it look like now? Why are we doing it differently, one case or another case? What are the problems, like delays or higher costs? What's causing the problems? How much does it actually cost you to do this process? And what's the points of risk that you have in terms of customer satisfaction and compliance? And then once we have an understanding of a process, we can look at how to apply some of the technologies that I spoke about previously in order to improve it. You want to automate whatever possible, while still supporting knowledge workers who might need to step in and resolve a complex scenario. You also want to monitor it end-to-end so that you can track metrics, things that are important to the customer, not just individual departmental metrics. So you have to be able to look at that end-to-end monitoring. So let's look at just a very old school, a simplified view of a very old school claims process. So your customer has some water damage in their basement, and they fill out a claim form, they print out some documentation to show the value of the items that are damaged, and they drop it in the mail. Now, inside your organization, somebody opens the mail and captures enough of the information to know what to do with it. So this is usually the first notice of loss step. Then they pass it on to a claims manager who decides what to do with what is going to happen with the claim. Now, of course, this decision step is actually complex, might involve other people, external claims adjusters, and so on. But at the end of the day, the claims manager decides whether to pay the claim and how much to pay. Then it moves on to a payment clerk to issue the payment. Now, for some simple claims, you might do auto adjudication and payment, but this is likely the exception rather than the rule. Now, what do we want to have happen to that? If we go back to the characteristics of intelligent processes, you want to start by making everything digital by default and then automate everything possible. I've listed a number of areas to consider here, from collection and analysis of claims information to adjudication to recommendations and alerts. So lots of different things that you can do here. And the different automation technologies that I was talking about in the previous section can come into play here. So using RPA to interact with legacy screens and systems, using intelligent capture and artificial intelligence to get content out of the claim documents, and machine learning for doing things like fraud detection, data-driven fraud detection. Now that doesn't mean, as I said, you're not going to be removing people from the process, but you want to involve them when the automation can't figure out what to do, so that the workers are problem solving rather than copying and pasting data between screens. This is a much better use of their time. So now let's revisit that claims process made more intelligent and streamlined. The customer enters the claim information online. They attach electronic documents and photos. An intelligent capture step, so this is now effectively your FNOL step, your first notice of loss, reviews the claim data, attached content, requests additional information from the claimant if there's something missing, because that intelligent capture step can recognize what's in those documents and what's missing in order to continue on in the process. So then the default process would use some sort of AI-driven auto adjudication to decide the claim and then auto pay it. So everything automated in the standard way of doing things. Now, in exception cases, and hopefully these become fewer over time as your intelligent capture and auto adjudication algorithms improve, there's still a person to review a claim and make a decision. So adding intelligence and automation to claims processing can really give you significant benefits. From a productivity and efficiency standpoint, the entire process finishes faster and takes fewer internal resources. customers like that. Their claims get processed faster, and if you're sending them alerts about what's happening, then they get to see what's going on along the way. Now, on the compliance and adjudication side, automated rules and processes means that things are done in the right way with the same rules each time. So this gives you better compliance, better adherence to regulations, and a greater overall consistency in how you approve or deny claims. And I just want to finish up with one final thought before I hand it back to Reggie. We often talk about digital disruption or disruptive innovation, where a completely new technology changes the way that a market works. The current situation is turning this around. We have a market and societal disruption that's changing the way technology will be used and is being used. This impacts your internal business processes and how you interact with your customers. How your organization chooses to deal with this during this crisis will determine whether you exit it as a market leader or as a laggard. Thanks for listening today. Over to you, Reggie, and then I'll be back for a bit of Q&A at the end.
Thank you. By way of quick summary, there is a really important point that Sandy brought up, that insurers, in adapting to the crisis, are rushing to take their legacy systems and legacy processes and put them online to make them easier to access for their customers. And in many ways, those who write about digital transformation can say this is a big mistake, that these times in particular, the coronavirus meeting digital transformation has actually made new demands on what we do with our technology. And it requires us to take a more intelligent look at how these processes actually work and how those systems and how those legacy processes, or if they even serve the needs of customers today. And so when digitizing those processes, it's important to think about how we do that in a way that is more intelligent. And there are two particular areas that are problematic for insurers today. One of them is content. We can talk about content. Sandy touched on this very briefly, but content is the documents, the messages, and all of that unstructured information that is necessary for engaging your insurance company. Every document you have to provide for a claim or underwriting is proof of your eligibility. Those processes don't go away, but currently insurers live in old ways of doing it, reliance on paper, reliance on legacy systems. And if anything, digital transformation asks us to re-examine how we do that. Digital intelligence is a method for asking those questions. And it's where content meets process that is critically important. Legacy process or legacy ways of doing things bring forward those legacy processes. And if anything, the consumerization of technology today that we've seen, like being able to order dinner seamlessly on an app, our insurance processes have not caught up to that set of expectations. So digital intelligence is really about asking where content meets process. And it's really ultimately about thinking about the user experience and how you bring your offerings as an insurer more to the consumer in a way that helps you to compete, at least to hold on to customers and to gain new customers. And the three essential pillars of that are people, processes, and content. And just as one example, and I'll use this as a close, a large property and casualty insurer has actually been able to use this approach to automate many of their processes and achieve some significant savings, both in terms of time and money. And in closing, I will say that with this particular approach, it's really about being willing to ask some fundamental questions about how, as an insurer, you're doing business. It's, yes, being more efficient, saving time, saving money, removing touches are also important, but those are requirements today for insurers. But what insurers seek as the Holy Grail is to create online contactless experiences that delight their customers and make them want to do business with that insurer. That's the biggest hurdle that insurers need to overcome today in going digital. And today we have discussed lots of the challenges that insurers face, some of their barriers, and some of the opportunities, particularly in the way that the coronavirus is redefining how humans interact in a business sense and in a social sense. And with those opportunities comes the need to ask some very important questions about how your technology, how your process, and how your interactions as an insurer are serving the needs of your customer and facilitating business in this new world we're facing today. And with that, we have a few minutes for questions.
Thank you, Reggie. Thank you, Sandy. Got a few questions here that we'll take. I know we've got 4 minutes, so we'll try to get to the most of them. If you don't get to your questions, we will be making sure to reaching out to you. One of the questions we have here is, this one's for Reggie. InsurTechs already have gotten a toehold in competing for the customer before COVID hit. Has this event and its requirement for contactless business given the InsurTech a stronger competitive edge? More business?
That's a very interesting question, and from our perspective, it appears that the InsurTechs had an edge when they entered the market in that they approached insurance from a consumer perspective rather than an internal operational perspective. And that gave them an advantage that at least got the traditional insurers to stand up and take notice. During the COVID crisis, as we all know, we have gone to a contactless, socially distanced model for all consumer face-to-face interactions. Going to get a coffee down at the local Starbucks or the local coffee house. It's all gone to apps and delivery and pickup. So if anything, what the InsurTech started has been accelerated in importance in the current crisis, where we've actually had to engage in person-to-device interaction as much as possible to replace person-to-person interaction because of that fear of contagion.
Thank you, Reggie. This next question we have here for Sandy. How can business analysts use process modeling and mining together to help redesign our processes for remote workers?
Yeah, that's a good question. Is business analysts have typically used process modeling techniques and process where they will do things like Gemba walks or walkthroughs, job shadowing, some in-person interviews, and so on, and then they will build the process models that people tell them are the way that things get done. Process mining is used more by a little more technical analysts, although usually still business analysts, to look at the processes as they are within a ERP system, so within a SAP system or even a claim system or whatever. But I think bringing those two together can be really powerful. We can no longer do those in-person type interviews or the walkthroughs in an office to see how the paper flows and how the work flows through the offices. So the process mining gives us a framework in order to say, here's the general flow of the process, and then process modeling can be done to then augment that with what the workers are doing at each step and what might need to happen to bring all of these things together. So there's definitely room for multiple sort of intelligent analysis techniques. We really need to focus more on or as much or more on the intelligence and not just the automation side of this. It's a lot of process management is really focused on automation in the past and not so much on getting a really good understanding of what's happening and what are the root causes for problems in processes, for example.
Great. Thanks, Sandy. And what are some of the best practices for deciding what tasks to automate versus which should be done by people?
Well, definitely anything that can be automated should be automated, I think. It's like as long as you are not impacting the customer experience. It comes down to a measure of the customer experience. So if you have a task that you can automate either through just some simpler automation or even through things like AI and machine learning, and it and the customer satisfaction is the same or better because of that automation, then you should be doing that. If you have the potential to decrease the customer satisfaction by removing a person from a task, then you don't want to do that. You don't want to do the automation in that case. You really have to look at that end-to-end customer journey and the customer satisfaction as being one of the key performance indicators that you have on that, and use that to get some sort of measure of when to automate and when not to automate.
Thank you, Sandy. With that question, we are coming to the end of the hour here. Once again, I would like to thank all our attendees today for joining in and for your questions. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach us at sales@abby.com. And if you have any other questions for our speakers, their information is on the right-hand side. Feel free to reach out to them. Once again, thank you. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye-bye.